familiar with French bread because of the baguette, but there is such a large variety of breads in France that there's so much more to explore beyond the baguette. So today I'm going to share with you a really unique bread called couronne bordelaise, or crown bread from Bordeaux. And this is a medium hydration sourdough that is shaped into 6 balls that are held together by a disc of dough that pops up into a crown shape during baking. So I hope you'll join me today as I walk you through the steps on how to make this delicious and unique bread. So let's get started. To make this bread, the pre-ferment that we're going to make is called a pâte fermentée. This isn't actually a pre-ferment at all. It's when you take a piece of dough from a previous batch and add it to the current batch. But because we don't have a previous batch of dough, we have to make the pâte fermentée from scratch. And the unique thing about this recipe is that we're using a pâte fermentée that is going to make up the majority of the final dough. So we're basically mixing together a small loaf of bread to ferment overnight, and then we're going to mix it with the rest of the ingredients tomorrow. So you'll see that I stirred together 300 grams of bread flour with 3/4 teaspoon of fine sea salt, and now I'm adding to a separate bowl 25 grams of 100% hydration sourdough starter. My starter is made from rye flour, but you can use whatever kind of starter you have on hand as long as it's 100% hydration, which means it's made from equal parts flour and water. And as always, you will want to feed your starter 6 to 8 hours before using it so it is bubbly and active. Whisk the 25 grams of starter with 210 grams of filtered water. I suggest filtered so that if you live somewhere that has chlorine in the water, you don't run the risk of killing your starter. And you'll notice that I'm not giving imperial measurements for this recipe. If you're going to get into sourdough baking, I highly recommend using a scale. It's so much more accurate and you'll end up with fewer failed loaves of bread. My scale is linked below. Mine was only $17, but you can find them as low as $7 or $8 too. So once your starter is fully incorporated with the water, you're going to stir in the flour salt mixture. And I finally bought one of these Danish dough whisks that I see everybody using. This thing is awesome. It incorporates the dough so much better than a wooden spoon and a regular whisk where the dough would get stuck between it. And I bought this on Amazon for only $10. I've linked it below if you'd like one too. I wish I would have bought it sooner because, it's only $10. What was I thinking? I should have gotten it ages ago. So mix it all together until there are no flour streaks left, and then switch to your hands to incorporate it into a smooth ball. It is very sticky, so you can add a little bit of flour to your surface, but you don't want to add much because you want to keep the hydration pretty consistent with the original ratios. But I actually should have, instead of flouring my surface in my hands, I should have wet my hands. This often tends to be much easier with sticky dough is to work the dough with wet hands. But you're not looking to knead the dough to develop gluten at this point. You're just trying to make it into a smooth ball. Now you're going to put it into a bowl and cover it with plastic wrap and set it somewhere warm to rise for a couple of hours. You're looking for it to 1.5 times its original size. How long this takes really just depends on a variety of reasons, from how warm your room is to how active your sourdough starter is. So it really is a range of 1 hour to maybe 3 to 4 hours. Sourdough is highly variable. Once it has reached 1.5 times its original size, or about there, you're going to punch it down to degas it, and then just kind of knead it a couple of times and rearrange it in the bowl, and then cover it back up. And you're going to stick this in the refrigerator overnight. You can leave it in the fridge for up to 3 days though. The making of the final dough will be in the morning, and you'll let it rise and prepare it throughout the day the following day. So if the following day doesn't work for you schedule-wise, you can leave it in the fridge for up to 3 days. So you'll see that I am punching down and kneading a couple of times my refrigerated dough, and I'm just punching it down and then cutting it into a bunch of small pieces and leaving it covered at room temperature for about an hour to warm up before we mix it in with the rest of the ingredients. These small pieces will be much easier to incorporate into the rest of the dough, and you want to also let it come to room temperature because that will help it rise better and also incorporate into the dough better. Cover up the bowl again and let the dough warm up at room temperature for an hour before you mix your final dough together. Now add the pieces to your stand mixer and then add 100 grams of water and turn the mixer on low to begin to incorporate the water and further break up the dough. The two won't fully combine, but it will get them started. Then add in 180 grams of bread flour and half a teaspoon of salt and let the mixer run on medium speed until a smooth dough forms. While it's mixing, I'll talk a little bit about this bread. It comes from the city of Bordeaux, which is in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region of the country. I really tried to find the history of this bread, but I couldn't find anything. If you know this bread's origin story, please share with me in the comments below because I would love to find out more about it. There is another bread from Bordeaux called the couronne des rois bordelaise, which is a brioche crown made for Epiphany. And I actually made it for the channel a few years ago. I'll link it below. And I'm wondering if these two are connected in some way. Perhaps a more savory, less sweet version to celebrate Epiphany. I'm not sure. So like I said, if you know more about this bread and its origins or any traditions connected with it, please comment below and share with me. Looking back at the dough, you're going to let the mixer run on medium speed for 7 to 10 minutes until the dough can pass the window pane test, which is where you stretch a small piece of dough, and if it doesn't rip and you can see light through it, then the gluten has properly developed and you're ready to move on to the next stage. Then you're going to put the dough into a covered bowl and let it sit out at room temperature to rise for 4 hours. And after the first hour, the second hour, and the third hour, you're going to perform a stretch and fold, which is where you take the dough and you stretch it up high and you fold it over itself, and then you turn the bowl and do the same thing in the opposite direction, stretching up high and folding the dough over itself. And this helps to develop the gluten structure without overworking the dough. What you're doing here basically is reorganizing the gluten network that's already developed in the dough and just providing a stronger and better strengthening of the gluten structure. This leads to a really nicely shaped and textured dough once it is fully baked. So make sure to set your timer to remember to perform your stretch and folds, and there's no need to perform the stretch and fold after the 4th hour because you'll be shaping your dough shortly after that. If you've learned something and are enjoying this video, I'd appreciate it if you give the video a thumbs up. And also, if you haven't subscribed already, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button and notification bell so that you can stick around for more videos like this one. I make weekly videos sharing a European recipe from a different country each week, and I usually share the history and traditions that go along with each recipe. So if that interests you, I hope you'll stick around. So this is what my dough looks like after the 4th hour. It's doubled in size. But before we punch down the dough and shape it, we need to create a couronne proofing basket. And you can buy special proofing baskets for this type of bread, but it's really not necessary because you can make a homemade version. Here I have a 12-inch proofing basket that I've put a jar in the middle of, and then I've draped kitchen towels over that as a makeshift banneton liner. Then you'll want to very generously flour the kitchen towels or whatever you're using as a liner. You want the liner to be made of natural materials like cotton or linen. anything that's synthetic may stick to the dough. So you'll want to stay away from that. So really heavily flour the liner and rub it into it, just so that once you've worked on this beautiful bread and you turn it out of the basket, you don't end up with your dough completely stuck to the liner. That's always the worst. It makes everything kind of collapse, and it's just very disappointing when you've worked so hard on your sourdough. One thing that actually works really well that I didn't have here but I used at another time when I was making this bread is rice flour. When you line your liner with rice flour and then combined with a little bit of all-purpose flour, that really helps to keep the dough from sticking. So now you're going to weigh out 7 pieces of dough. The first piece will be 150 grams, and then you will weigh out 6 following pieces that will be between 100 and 105 grams. I think mine ended up being 102 grams, so in that range. Then cover up the pieces you're not working with, and you're going to start by rolling out the 150 gram piece of dough into a circle using a rolling pin. And this piece will be draped over that hump or that jar that you put in your proofing basket. You'll want this circle that you're going to roll out to be about 10 inches in diameter or about 25 centimeters. Then roll that up onto your rolling pin, and then you're going to drape it over that hump in your proofing basket. And you'll want that circle to come about halfway down the outside wall of the basket. Then you're going to take the following pieces of dough and you're going to shape them into balls. And you're going to bring in all of the outer edges of the dough and bring it towards the center, pinch that all together, and then you're going to turn it over and put it under your hand. And with your cupped hand, you're going to roll it over the surface of your work surface in a clockwise fashion. And this will help to build tension in the ball. And then you're going to drag it towards you in several directions to create tension across the top of the ball. And this will just help to create a good structure for each of those balls of dough. Then place each shaped ball evenly spaced but not touching around the basket. And you'll want the collar of dough that's over the jar to be touching the ball, but there's no need to do what I'm doing here, where I'm stretching it to be all the way under the balls. This is unnecessary and actually keeps the collar from popping up all the way. I did this for the first time I made this, but I avoided doing this the second time, and the collar actually popped into a crown shape the second time really well. Now you're going to make 6 triangular cuts across the top of the dough collar. And then you're going to take these triangles and pull them over each ball of dough, and this is going to hold them together as they bake. Then after you do this, you're going to cover everything and let it rise until it is doubled in size. This takes about an hour to an hour and a half. And about an hour before baking, you'll want to heat up your Dutch oven in the oven at 450 degrees Fahrenheit or 230 degrees Celsius. And you'll want to heat this for about an hour before baking. You really want that Dutch oven really hot. It will help the collar of the dough to pop up really well. So once it doubles in size, you're going to flip everything over onto a piece of parchment, and you're going to remove your proofing basket and your towels very gently. And do this slowly just to make sure that nothing has stuck to the towels, and just pull it away from the dough. And then you're going to slide that into the Dutch oven that's been heating for an hour. And this is a little bit tricky, but it does slide in one piece, even though it was a little nerve-wracking putting something this shaped into a Dutch oven and watching it slide and hoping it'll stay together, but it did in fact stay together. And I'm just brushing off excess flour here. You're going to bake that in the Dutch oven covered with the lid for about 15 minutes, and then remove the lid and bake it for another 15 minutes. And just keep an eye on it towards the end of baking. Because this has a large surface area, it can burn a lot easier than a regular solid loaf of dough, and it also bakes a lot quicker. So I'm letting it bake here for 15 minutes with the lid on, and then you'll see me remove the lid and bake it for another 15 minutes. I always like to check the temperature of my bread before I remove it from the oven so I don't end up with an uncooked loaf. And you're looking for around 200 degrees Fahrenheit or 93 degrees Celsius. Carefully remove it from the oven and place it on a cooling rack, and then it's ready to enjoy once it has fully cooled down. Gosh, this was such a gorgeous bread, and it felt like such an accomplishment when it came out of the oven. I'm really looking forward to trying this. So I have a little piece here that I've torn off. I'm not going to put any butter on it. I want to just taste it for what it is. For a piece of white bread, it has such an amazing flavor and also texture. It's the perfect ratio between crunchy outer crust and chewy, fluffy interior. I really like the medium hydration sourdough, so it doesn't have the big, large pockets of air bubbles. Obviously, there's a time and place for bread like that. I love that type of bread too, but this just seems perfect for that bread roll to not have the big, giant air pockets inside. It just creates a really nice texture. You can't always tell when a bread is sourdough. It doesn't always have that sour flavor, but with this bread, you can taste some of the sourness. So there's just a lot of depth of flavor for a piece of white bread. So I highly recommend trying this. It's gorgeous, it tastes amazing, and you could have it as a tear and share bread at a party because you can tear off the bread rolls and people can take what they'd like. Or you could also just have this as a beautiful piece of bread to accompany a bowl of soup on a Friday night. So honestly, this bread is perfect for any occasion. So I highly recommend trying it. And just a reminder, make sure to sign up for my new monthly email newsletter that I recently started. It's free to sign up. And I will be actually featuring the region of Galicia, Spain, in my September newsletter, which will be coming up in a few weeks. And Galicia, Spain has a lot of unique foods from that region, but also some very unique sourdough breads. So you won't want to miss that. Plus, if you sign up now, you'll still get my August newsletter, which was all about plums and how they're used throughout the different European countries. And there's also a bonus recipe at the end of that newsletter that's not already on the channel. So I have put the link in the description box right at the top. It's free, and I hope you will sign up. If you would like another sourdough bread recipe, I highly recommend my 100% rye sourdough from Germany. And if you'd like to make bread but want to use yeast instead of sourdough, I have a whole bread playlist here, so you can browse through that and check out what recipes interest you. And I will see you next time.